So you guys sent in this blog post, and I gotta say, this is a really interesting deep dive. Daisuke Ishii, right?
Mm.
This Japanese entrepreneur, scientist.
Yeah.
He is really like challenging how we think about where Japan is going in the future.
It's a very it's a very different perspective, I think. And welcome to the show, by the way.
Oh yeah, thanks for being here as always. But it is really interesting because we always hear about like Japan's shrinking population, the aging workforce, all of the challenges, and he doesn't shy away from those things, but then he's like, but this is actually pushing Japan towards its biggest strength, and that's what he calls the Galapagos syndrome.
Yeah, when I first read that, I was like, okay, where's he going with this?
Eh.
But it actually, like the way he explains it, it really makes sense.
It makes total sense. It totally clicked for me because it's like, think about those really unique creatures that you only find in the Galapagos Islands, right?
Right.
They evolved in this isolation.
Right.
And because of that, they have these crazy adaptations that you don't see anywhere else. And he's saying Japan's kind of done the same thing, but with its culture and its technology.
Yeah, he uses the example of Japan and the UK, both island nations, both kind of shaped by their geography in a way, right?
Totally.
But they've had very, very different reactions to kind of, globalization and all of that.
Yeah, and that historical context is so important here because he even points out that even when Japan was largely closed off from the world, they were sending out emissaries, like these Kentushi and these Kanzuishi, to learn from other cultures, especially China. So they were absorbing knowledge, bringing back ideas, adapting them to fit their own context.
It wasn't just a pure isolation. It was like a very strategic, okay, we're going to go out, we're going to get what we need, but we're going to do it our own way.
Exactly.
And that's, I think, really important because he's not, Ishii's not advocating for like, Japan needs to go back to being this closed-off nation. It's more like, no, you've always had this unique approach to innovation.
Right.
And now with these kind of demographic shifts, economic challenges, this is your opportunity to really lean into that.
Yeah, it's about playing to your strengths. And one of the things that really struck me was his example of, well, Japanese toilets.
Clears throat, the infamous, yes, the TOTO toilet.
Okay, I know it sounds a little out there, but stay with me.
Yeah.
He's using this as a symbol of the Galapagos syndrome in action.
Yeah.
These aren't just toilets, okay? These are like high-tech marvels. They have heated seats, bidet functions.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like all this stuff that most of the world doesn't even think about.
It's true. And, it's funny because it's not just about the technology. It's like the craftsmanship, the attention to detail, the user experience. Like it reflects a deeper cultural value.
Yes, totally. And that's where I started to see his point because he's saying this approach, this Japanese way of doing things, has the potential to be so incredibly valuable because how often do you see that kind of thoughtfulness put into products that are designed for a global market?
It's true. One of the things that I thought was really interesting and also kind of surprising was when he brings up the Japanese emperor.
I know, right?
Like, what?
Total left turn.
Yeah, but then when he explains
That
it,
makes sense. Yeah, it's like, oh, okay.
he acts as this kind of like anchor of stability, right? This like unbroken line going back centuries.
Shared cultural identity.
The shared cultural identity that a lot of other nations, especially in the West, we just don't have.
Right.
He even contrasts it with like European royalty, which often comes with like so much baggage,
Yeah, totally.
So it's interesting. It's like,
and you can see how that ties into his whole argument about like, okay, if Japan wants to stand out, if they want to offer this different model, having that kind of like deep cultural foundation is actually a huge asset.
it is. It's interesting.
Yeah.
And this idea of kind of resilience and, drawing strength from history, it comes up again when he talks about the Zero fighter plane
Oh, yeah.
in World War II.
That was another one where I was like, okay, I have to reread this paragraph to see where he's going.
Right.
But he talks about how American pilots were terrified of these planes because they were so agile and powerful,
Well, and he uses this really, I think, vivid anecdote from this documentary. And it's these American pilots who are like, decades later, they're still like, man, those Zeros, man.
Yeah.
And so for him, it's like this example of how Japan has been underestimated before.
Right.
To everyone's detriment.
Yeah, it's like, don't count Japan out. They have this capacity for innovation, and it goes way back.
Exactly. And I think he sees that in their history, their culture, even their approach to technology, like we were talking about.
Yeah.
And it's like, instead of trying to fit into someone else's mold, Japan needs to really embrace what makes it unique. in order to thrive.
So it's not just about surviving these challenges, it's about using them as an opportunity to like redefine what success even looks like. But like what does that actually mean, you know? Like what's his vision for what that future looks like?
This is where it really clicked for me because it's like he's saying Japan can take all of this, the technology, the culture, this focus on craftsmanship, on well-being, and use it to actually make a difference in the world.
Yeah, and he really sees those things as interconnected. Like it's not just about, exporting more gadgets, it's about offering a different model for success.
Right, because he talks about his time living in New York and seeing those extremes, the incredible wealth, but also the really heartbreaking poverty.
It clearly had a big impact on him. Like he started to question the values he was seeing. This idea that individual success is all that matters. And he even talks about how, some people underestimated him when they found out he was Japanese.
Like they couldn't reconcile it with being this ambitious entrepreneur,
Exactly. And that's when he brings up this Mecca principle.
which basically means like finding your area of expertise, that thing you could be the best in the world at.
So not Silicon Valley 2.0, but maybe like Japan becomes the leader in, I don't know, robotics that actually improves people's lives or something.
Yeah, or sustainable cities that are designed for well-being.
Yes. And he reminds us, like, think about how often you hear people praising Japan for things like respect for elders, for being so clean and safe.
Right, values that we might dismiss as old-fashioned, but are actually incredibly relevant in today's world.
Totally. And then he makes this analogy about Italians abandoning spaghetti for hamburgers, which sounds ridiculous,
It
right?
is, but his point is Japan needs to hold on to its cultural flavor while still engaging with the world.
And I think that's what makes this whole thing so interesting. He's not saying reject the world. It's about, like you said, authenticity.
And having the courage to be different, because that's where your true strength lies.
It's a powerful message. And I think it applies to all of us, like what are those unique strengths that we can bring to the world?
Absolutely. It's about finding your own mecca, that place where your skills and your values can really shine.
I love that. All right, well, that's our deep dive for today. We covered a lot of ground,
A lot to think about.
as always. Thanks for listening, everybody.